because we don't have a lot of time. So now I've seen that some people have begun with the second one. The first terminology is breast cancer, left breast cancer. So we said that we were beginning with that line. What is your allocated code? The code of ICD-11 is 2C6Z. Yes, 2C6Z. And the one from XK8G. And in line 10, C50.9. Okay, very good. So, bravo. And so we have the correct solutions. They are right. Well, it's an example where you can see when you've done a search, the query in the tool. You see that when you add the direct term, nothing comes up. But if you apply flexible search, you can see it already combined with the extension code that indicates the left side. You don't have that specificity on number 10, so you keep the C50.9. Now the question from the colleagues from Chile was, well, how do you report it? Of course, it depends on the purpose and it depends on you. What's the level of detail? As we say, the tool is optional. You can have whatever extension code. So when speaking about some purposes where you need to have a cancer report, perhaps you need that level of specificity. If not, the pre-coordinated code. Okay, very well. So the second one, that is before the M type 2 with retinopathy. Another country, please. Where are the colleagues from Venezuela or Nicaragua? No, we're not at the platform. We're not there. In the sheet. If not, we'll continue with Chile. (5A11) on ICD-11 and 9B71.0Z.
¿Y por qué? Está bien porque cortamos hasta el 0, está bien. Sí. No, la ella puso. Es que no, pues ahí lo buscamos con Z. Está bien. Es que nosotros lo buscamos. Y en la C10
Oh, and ICD-10 11.3.
¿Y el asterisco?
The star.
Nos faltó el asterisco.
The star was missing. H36. Well, ICD-10, we have the convention from DAG asterisk, so it's codified E11.3, diabetes mellitus myelitis with complications, and then we apply diabetic retinopathy. When going to ICD-11, you'll see, and I'm trying to... Well, first of all, what I want to say is when going to the navigator on the 10, you'll realize that you can't make a search with term variations. For instance, if you type DM, type 2, you won't see anything because there's no flexibility on the search in terms of variation of the terminology. If we have, that's what we have, right? So I only have DM type 2, and I get immediately the correct code in blue, which indicates that we are certain that this is the correct code. And if we now go to, let me close the other windows. Now we have, for that example, well, basically we have a situation where we need to post-coordinate with another pre-coordinated code, which is diabetes, type of diabetes, and the complications. And in that case, it is retinopathy, and that is something you can do through that window here on the navigator. When you go in retinopathy or diabetic foot, whether any complication, and you'll see the code applied, and that separation between stem codes is through a slash. So that is extremely key to reapply, because I've seen that some people have just modified the code with the stem code, and the other stem code you separate with a slash. When speaking about a stem code or a pre-coordinated code with an extension, you can do it through the end sign. That is the convention we're using. And you realize that that is something that, here the code is something you can generate automatically, and it's something that I can only copy and paste in the document. So, very well. Now you get to the set point. The whole code ends up with a Z. At least that is what we saw.
Ya, lo que pasa es que tengo...
Yeah, the thing is that this is frozen.
Claro, con una Z.
Ok, pone la Z. Perfecto.
Because you have the Z, so the thing is that... I'll try again. There you go, look. That is atherosclerotic. That's what this is talking about. Diabetic retinopathy, non-specified. Yes, and that's why we end up with Z. That's okay? Yes. Okay, very well. Now we'll continue with the Yeah? I have a question. Not long ago, you said that there was going to be a minimum of 4 characters. So in this example, for ICD-10, with 4 characters, you have all the specifications. So you get to diabetic retinopathy with 4 characters. With the ones you just showed, no? Yeah, can you write the word? The word? Yes. You have H36.0, right? That says diabetic retinopathy. So you have 4 characters, and you can go to the specification level. My doubt is, and ICD-11, if you only choose the first 4 ones, you only see type 2 diabetes. So it's not enough to specify the specific complication. Right, but what I'm saying, he said that as a minimum 4 digits. If a country has 4, they will lose the specificity. Exactly. You need to take into account the changes that have been done on ICD-11 in terms of the diabetic specification, because on the 10th we had many subtypes of diabetes with the complications, and this causes many problems in statistics, because they've realized that if you go to the statistics, many cases are codified with multiple codes, or better yet, no specifications. So what's been done in terms of design within ICD-11 that to clarify that whole area, making a cut between type of diabetes and complications, and how on ICD-10 they now have an app on the combination, which is basically that, but it is applied more systematically. And if you notice, complications, chronic complications have been classified as diabetic foot or retinopathy below the chapter of organ, while complications, acute complications, are now in the diabetic chapter. But that is also related with the way that this has been organized and simplified. Well, the design specifically, because it's been quite problematic. So we'll continue because we don't have that much time. The other example,
No hablamos ahora del ICD-10.
we're not talking about ICD feeds. No. We are still finishing the sheet. Okay? So that line, subdural hematome, acute subdural hematome.
Ya. Bueno, es muy una pregunta, Amanda.
El hematoma.
Hematome, subdural hematome. ICD-10 sends you directly to traumatic because, by the way, we have the traumatic word as a non-essential modifier, and the entrance code is S006 for S065, I'm sorry. I-62 should be described as non-traumatic, and that is on ICD-10. ICD-10, if you look at the alphabetic index, the main term with subdural / traumatic as a non-essential subdural is S00.5 acute, It's not something we're gonna find. But if I want to get to I-62-0, should be subdural, non-traumatic subdural, described as such.
¿Entendés?
Ok,
Yo trabajé
bueno,
con la 2018 desde acá.
como tenemos un poco presión,
Since we have a little bit of time pressure, I'm gonna leave you to solve it among you. But basically here, that's very clear in both cases. Now what about the second terms from the Hutchinson-Gilford syndrome? You have those two codes. So here, I want to highlight the point that Hutchinson-Gilford syndrome is just an example of a very rare condition. And as it's been said before, we have the ability now on ICD-11 to truly capture those rare conditions. If you go to the hierarchy, those are the rules that Robert was mentioning. We are on the 7th level on the roots, and that is classified. That is being classified, but you can actually capture it through the index that we have. And as you can see on ICD-10, you haven't gotten to that level of detail. We didn't really have the technology to capture this. So that in the experts or the orphanet colleagues working in that area have made it very happy to have that ability to capture this. And also the colleagues from Chile mentioned this when speaking about cataracts related to age, where you also find a large degree of detail, which we can't include in the statistical version, but we do have in this index as a category with a unique identifier. So very well, we end up with the last one,
which is this external cause case. So, there, you can realize, of course, that has to be codified in a separated manner. First, for this humerus exposed right fracture, and then you can realize if you actually search by using the tool, you can specify this very easily. By means of the interface you have, you are only selecting the codes. And the same thing happens with the external cause, where you can, as Robert was also mentioning before, you can capture a lot of details. For example, the secondary school, it wasn't there on ICD-10, you can specify this now. If you do this in ICD-10, you have to go back to the beginning of the chapter, the search for the extension code manually, so it took a lot more time. And if you, the more specific you want this to be, the longer it's going to take. So, since we are really short in time, I want to wrap this up, and I want to show you the second exercise. We don't have time to finish that here, so that's going to be your homework. And tomorrow we are going to see the results. You can do that today, for example, during dinner or while drinking. I don't know. It's way easier if you do this while enjoying a drink, because Patricia also has a really important part where we talk about statistics, and I don't want to take too much time away from here. I just want to show you on the platform itself what you have to do. So, when we are in a platform, and I'm looking for. Okay, so you who have registered, you can then find the PAHO Center, and if you go to settings, you can select Spanish, and we'll be able to see the site in Spanish. Some of you have already done so. So you go there, and you will find a module called Morbidity 01 with 10 terms. You open this, and here you will find the first case. You open it, and here you will find the term you have to code. So what do? You copy this term, as in the test, and then you click here and start the coding. And when you click, we will already take track of the time, but you don't know that. And then you open this, and basically it has two parts. The first part where you enter the correct code, and and then a question whether you have run into any difficulties or not. And here you have a link where you go to the, or rather that takes you to the coding tool. And then another page comes up. You paste the text in here, and in that case, for example, it's really simple. You are taken directly to the correct code, and a tip for you. You mustn't just enter the code, but rather you can just copy, and then you go back to that slide, you enter the code, and that's it. And then you're like, okay, we didn't have any problems here. And then you move on to the next one, and so on. And just to wrap up, the important part is that I want to show you that after wrapping the 10 terms up, you can go to another window called Dashboard, and then you open the dashboard, and then you are going to see how or what your results are like. So here, in your case, for example, it's going to be low, and in the center, and the module is going to be Morbidity 1. And here you can see your performance score and your place when compared to your other colleagues who have done this coding. And you can choose, for example, the diagnosis term, and you can see how you're doing when compared to the correct code, or the code considered correct in that case. And others who have done this coding and where they have put their code. And I just want to show that to you, so once you have been through all the 10 terms, you can go to the dashboard and see what your result is like. So we are going to finish the exercises now, and I will give the floor to our chair, or Patricia, but from Nicaragua, but we are going to review that tomorrow, We are going to review the results tomorrow, and we will also be talking about some specific factors. But it's important, so you can go through it now. Good evening. Moving on with our second regional meeting for ICD-11, we are going to have a discussion panel led by our colleagues from the Ministry of Health from Chile, so daily Piedra, who is a psychologist and statistician, and also Dr. Patricia Soliz, and our colleagues from HA. I don't know where they are, but they are. I just want to make a comment. We are a little bit short on time, so we are going to have 10 minutes for each intervention, for each presentation, and then we are going to have 15 minutes, okay, for questions, comments, and observations from all the participants. So please, let's stay in time. So,
¿No se escucha? Ahora sí.
now you can hear me okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to give you a brief overview about the generation of vital statistics in Chile. And among the objectives we have is about the raising awareness on the production of vital statistics, and raise awareness on information gaps, medium and long-term challenges for generating mortality statistics, and planning the transition from ICD-10 to 11. Okay, there is a slide that apparently disappeared, so I will give you an overview. I'm not sure why, but I cannot find it. But basically, the vital statistics in Chile are produced by under an agreement, which is a three-party agreement with the Civil Registry, the National Institute of Statistics, and the Ministry of Health, where in the Civil Registry is where all vital events are entered into or registered, their fetal function, fetal deaths, and also deaths in general, and also births. We have a large database because of this, and this database we get this from in the Ministry of Health 1 week after the event took place, regardless of the event. So we in the Department of Statistics work with this database of these main vital events, and then we analyze, we process, we correct, we validate, and actually we work with other sources of data where we can try to correct our database. And after we have all of that, we do everything concerning coding, and in Chile coding is centralized. And we have all this quality process. On the other hand, we have the National Institute of Statistics, also INA, which is in charge of all these demographic variables. These variables are coded by the INE, but they come back to our MinSal database, and then we develop this database, and then the INA is in charge of releasing or publishing these national statistics for vital statistics, of course, or official statistics, as we say. And this is a really brief overview concerning the challenges we have between 2018 and 2020. On one hand, we have the implementation of an automated coding system for IRIS, for mortality IRIS, between 2017 and 2019, and we have to thank the CMC Center for their collaboration because they were really helpful. Actually, they visited us last year doing some coding for us, a course on for updating our ICD-10 2018 edition, and on the other hand, we were also subject to training on the IRIS software. So from that point, we started having or doing some pilot testing using 2016, and the results were fantastic. We had a IRIS matching, coding matching of 72%, which we thought was fabulous. And on the other hand, we had a 20.8% of non-matches, but those non-matches were basically due to maybe some coding criteria that Mexico had on one hand, also some criteria Chile had on the other hand, and also because we took our database and matched this with other sources of information, so of course that information was not reflected on the death certificate. But really, this was a really good exercise to such an extent that we are doing the same exercise for IRIS and the 2017 database, and we are about to implement this for 2018. This is all going to be coded under IRIS, and also we are already coding what we have for 2019 under IRIS, which is fantastic, at least for us, as we are not just going to have basic causes, but also multiple causes. And on the other hand, one of the challenges we have for this year is adopting the recommendations by WHO in our death certificates, which are actually so old. We have a certificate that is not complying with the recommendations by the WHO, does not have any questions about maternal mortality, but we are working on implementing the new medical death certificate, and in this case, this will be a digital certificate. This is going to be really useful for us in this automated coding process, and this is going to allow us to have a good information from the source, because right now what we have all these transcriptions of the causes of death done at the civil registry, and that implies many transcription mistakes that we suffer before putting this through the IRIS system, and we actually have to correct this transcription. So And of course, we are going to have a good opportunity to have a better information. And another challenge we have for this period is related to training, that we are going to continue all the trainings that we are currently participating in, whether e-learning, as our professors were commenting on, that we are actually participating in with our coders, and we also want to extend this to mobility, which is extremely important for us. And well, we also have this issue about our virtual course, right, about the filling the certificate that we have been participating in since 2016. We try to make it so our doctors participate every year. We try to incentivize them in any way we can. Every year we try to have new alternatives to try and catch their attention so they attend the course. But actually, I believe he knows, because I'm always bothering him with this issue. Among the challenges we have, we also have a document that is really important for us and that we are still unable to send or submit. It's about the having reclassification and intentional search for maternal death. We are still not estimating this maternal mortality, and we have to finish this document so it can be submitted to the interagency group. So once and for all, we don't do these estimates because we believe we don't need such estimation, and this is something we have to do. On the other hand, we are also thinking about how to do this. This is something that's not quite there yet. It's about developing a plan for the transition process and analyzing impact on the adoption of ICD-11, maybe evaluating the agreement level between coders concerning the diagnosis, this bridge coding, so as it's called, coding ICD-10 and 11, also stability and continuity processes for ICD-10 and 11, also assess the viability and reliability of ICD-11 in different circumstances and formats so as to minimize errors and consistency limits. On the other hand, we have many gaps. We have many things to do. For example, hospital exits and GRD, they have different codes. Hopefully the idea we have is to be able to have a multiple coding, as I said before, not just 2017, 2018, maybe go a little bit even backwards considering this. And also, this new death certificate is something that's our Achilles heel right now. We have to look for the way, and we know this is not an easy process. We have everything ready on the Ministry of Health, but the civil registry needs to change their system, and really it's really complicated. So that's where we are, and in an upcoming meeting I'll let you know how it goes, okay?
Bueno, no sé si tienen alguna pregunta.
I don't know if you have any questions.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todos.
So good afternoon, everyone. Once again, thank you so much. This is a presentation which has the objective of creating awareness about a component that has been mentioned throughout this session, but it's not the most mentioned one, which is the part of the analysis after generating the information. Because the objective, the economical effort, the effort in terms of human resources, is related to why, what for do we want this information, and we always hear that this is for the decision making, for health policies, And we have a series of users that in this case are using information and must perform all the analysis activities and policies in public health. And when speaking about a new classification, I am certain that basically all of you will agree with me that we have many questions in terms of what will happen. And we've touched upon this topic in these sessions, but it is a component that must have more relevance. Of course, it's a process in knowledge and planning that has to be linked with the fact of knowing and working science. So emphasis is in the analysis. And in that sense, when analyzing mortality, because I will only speak about mortality, you can ask the following question. How much do we know about the epidemiological pattern of the mortality of a population due to different variables and different disaggregations, and depending, of course, in variables known by everyone, such as the quality that has a series of components? That pattern is not something that I necessarily know correctly because it's linked to a series of factors depending on the country, the level, where that pattern is not really the one that is happening. So I can make an analogy like the case of the iceberg. I only know a part of it. However, there's another area that I don't know about. And I state this second question. How much can the epidemiological pattern change when adopting a new ICD revision? And it is actually a question that to the decision maker, the one planning and deciding, is interested in answering concretely. Because with him, we won't be able to make an exercise of ICD has such structure, the lining, the pre-setting, STEAM code, it is specifically for the decision making, and it is the epidemiological pattern. But why is it important to analyze changes? Because some might say that it's a naive question. There won't be changes, but everybody knows that there will be changes, and we have changes when replacing and adopting a new revision. It is a fact, a clear fact. Not accepting this would be lying, and in a terrible way, actually. So it's a clear fact. From there, we think it's so relevant to analyze changes, and of course the possible effects, because we've seen it in this session, what it means to classify the impact it will have at different levels. And why do I highlight this? Because I want to take you more to this area where we have, of course, indicators that are committed at different levels. We have global goals, regional goals, national goals, and of course, we need to have national goals that will be linked to mortality indicators, and they might be affected once again. This analysis becomes key. Monitoring assessment, progress report that all different levels must carry out, and which is, of course, related to a very clear exercise on rendering of accounts. This is just an example, with everything that the agenda represents and the commitments of the Sustainable Development Objectives. So it is relevant to prepare now to analyze the different changes and possible effects. We can't wait to implement ICD-11 and just say at that point, well, this happened. Well, it could have happened, right? But we believe that from our unit, it is not the healthiest decision. So what do we need? Because you might say, ICD-11 hasn't been implemented, so how do I make that analysis on the possible changes in that mortality pattern? I insist. We have several elements. Robert has presented this in actually a very interesting trip, I might say. Even though you're not an expert on ICD, but if you're an analyst in mortality, you need to know about the changes that have happened in important senses in terms of definitions. He presented this, if maternity has changed or not, indicators linked to what I insist are important commitments. The rules have changed? Well, no. He talked about up to which point they've changed? No. So these are elements that we need to know. How has the structure and content changed? We've also had a trip on this. We've talked about the certificate of death, because if we have changes, of course, we need to know this as analysts. The requirement of type for the report. Once again, those using information require reports, which must be very clear and precise. If they change or not due to the effects of the requirement, they may have effects on mortality. And finally, of course, it will be quite naive on our side, and we need to know about the epidemiological behavior of general mortality by age group. If not, I could not judge if the change is due to the ICD-11 adoption or due to the specific behavior of the event, which are two elements, two variables with which I need to play with. So how can we begin this? Of course, we can begin with several indicators, which we already have. Monitoring done with quality indicators. We have the classical, typical indicators of the poorly defined causes, unuseful causes, specific causes. If there's some movement, for instance, on ICD-11, heart attack goes to non-defined patterns. So there's a series of events that we need to take into account just in the quality area. Now, different indicators will be useful for the analysis of trends, for instance. If there will be a change in the presentation or behavior due to large groups of GBD, the low disease study, because we have transmittable and non-transmittable external causes, so the groups competing that in the region, about 80% of deaths are due to non-transmittable causes, and they will be affected due to the some specific cause. That would be something specific and of high importance. We need to begin with that type of analysis, then a chapter analysis, which is, of course, key, by cause group, by specific cause, and without a doubt by main causes in death, which are actually the ones presented to the minister, the undersecretary, and 10 main causes and the movement and competition of them. Also, we can also begin with specific indicators, because there are some countries that have specific indicators because they are very specific problems. For instance, Zika. For now, I don't know. There are indicators that might be useful to all countries, but some that the same country should identify, linked once again to the epidemiological pattern. And once again, I insist, we need to know about the epidemiological behavior linked to interventions and strategies. Why? Because mortality may decrease, which is expected, due to a good health system, due to interventions, where it might increase because something happened. And once again, I need to play in the sense of, is it due to classification or the event by itself? So it's necessary and can be done, of course. Some examples, briefly, just to wrap up. This is not a ICD change effect type of thing. It is an example on how a note in classification may affect an indicator, such as the case of poorly defined. We are managing chapter number 18, poorly defined, for selected countries. And I'm going to ask, please, I know it's hard, try to see the purple line from Guatemala. In 2008, there's an increase. I don't know if you can see it on that proportion. When analyzing these indicators, you might think, okay, this is a care indicator. Why is this increasing? It's due to the provinces. It is due to an age group, gender, because you might think that quality is getting worse. And if you've done training and it increases, well, what happens? When asking colleagues from Guatemala, that increase that year, which is basically 2009, matches the fact that they had training through 11 months and applied a note in volume number 3. They didn't knew that this existed. When there's a heart attack as unique cause is sent as poorly defined. So what they did? Next year, they moved that type of heart attack from chapter 9 to chapter number 18. When you look at the movement, I didn't put it due to time, from chapter 9 loses deaths because they are heart attacks, and they go to chapter 18. And it's that type of example that is the reason discussed with the country, obviously, in order to truly understand the cause. But let's go to see some clear examples you need to take into account. Transitions through ICD-11. Robert talked about it. It is a case, some might be in favor, some against, but it is a concrete fact. What has happened to the cerebrovascular disease group? It changes in the group. When you analyze, though, you need to ask what it means that it changes in the group. What is the impact? Should I be concerned or I shouldn't be? Because cerebrovascular disease is a key indicator. In most countries in the region, it's competing with cardio-ischemic in first or second level, and even more if it's for older populations. But does it make sense to be worried? We'll see. We know from now that the movement has been from Chapter 9, the classical one, from ICD-10, to a group that we know by heart when monitoring these indicators, which is I-60 and 69, and it goes to Chapter for nervous system. Whether I like it or not, they're there. So, what is the effect that this may have? And just as an early exploration, this is a table chart because it is the distribution of deaths regionally with the basis we have. I'm working with about 6 million deaths each year, which what I'm presenting is the proportional distribution by chapter. The biggest percentage is weight. The weight is on the lower bars. The heaviest chapter somehow is number 9. For instance, in 2016, almost 30% of total mortality is presented. So in 14 chapters, circulatory tumors, expiratory and external, are the ones dominating the mortality pattern, but it goes by chapter and due to ICD-10. But it's the first mapping where I need to check movement, because on the beginning we know that ICD-10, well, ICD-11 has a different structure. So I can't keep the ICD-10 structure. So what is the weight of cerebrovascular disease on Chapter 9? Because I also need to know about this. I know that Chapter 9 has an important weight in general mortality. And when doing just a drilling due to deaths amount here, each year we have that in the region. Well, obviously that has been affected due to coverage, the contribution of the countries, but we need to do it by country. About 1,560,000. Why lowering at the end? Because we always have data from less countries. We don't have data from Canada or Colombia, actually, that contributes with about 300 deaths each. And what is the weight in the proportion of the cerebrovascular group? It's important. In the region, you keep 22%. So I'm taking that groups that goes to another chapter. If we continue to manage the structure of ICD-10, the chapter would lose this group of causes. And it's supposed to go to what chapter? The nervous system. In the region, just to give you an idea, we don't have, in 2016, we have more deaths due to cerebrovascular than all deaths in that chapter, but I insist it is with ICD-10. And just to check if we should state or explain someone the movement, but with much careful. That is in terms of chapter, but I insist, chapters are no longer the same. Actually, the effect is simply due to the fact of where they are located now. But if we make an analysis due to main causes, and I present by using Nicaragua basis, the last available year we have is 2017, the main one, the causes have to be very specific. Cerebrovascular will continue to have the behavior they have. That is proportion, of course. Afterwards, we need to check risks or the rates, but it's not going to be affected. Of course, we need to see if it goes up, linked with ICD-11 due to something linked to this or due to the event. But strictly speaking, if I know about another chapter but due to analysis of main causes, it shouldn't be affected by a direct issue on the change of chapter in ICD-11. Another example, and I promise you it's the last one, it has to do with influenza. Robert mentioned the flu. When you say influenza, and you also speak like this, as if you were Dorothea, this goes from respiratory chapter. Yes, but what does that mean? We need to be worried once again that it goes away from the chapter of respiratory diseases. So we have everything to know if we have to be worried or not. It is a distribution due to the amount of deaths. The deaths in the region due to respiratory diseases is 10%. We saw that in the previous slide. And in absolute numbers, you need to be careful with this. They have this trend, which is regional. So be careful. And when we see this is a grouping by cause, and my grouping has an influence in pneumonia, which represents, actually, it is on the second place, 36% of the chapter. So you might think, yes, influenza and pneumonia does have a weight. But here we have influenza and pneumonia. What is more important? Is due to pneumonia or influenza? Pneumonia, the one that leaves, it's influenza. Once again, Dorothea leaves the room. And when looking at 2016, the specific composition, if I'm not mistaken, the codes that have changed from chapter number 2, J, 09, 10, 11, I think 12. Not all. I'm not sure. So when you look at the composition, influenza and pneumonia from J011 to J18, the queen in weight is non-specified organism influenza, 86% approximately. That is regional, but now has become something more national, depending on the country. Pneumonia has more weight, followed by this other one, J15, and the influenza actually doesn't overcome regionally 5%. And that is the one that has changed, that goes away. But this is grouped with pneumonia. So we need to be careful about, that we have some examples on how we can approach changes. So what other changes can be presented when adopting a classification and that are actually positive and have been mentioned? Here we'll only share with you, actually we're going to place you in the USB, the example, and it was presented by a colleague in the collaborating centers meeting in Korea. How can you have a representation that is non-updated? Some events will appear, and when appearing, they will be measured, and when they are measured, they will be meaningful. That is the case that Robert mentioned, which are allergies. They have carried out a work with the databases from Brazil on how, through the adoption of ICD-11, this event truly, and I've copied this completely from the text, this will be in mortality, which is key. So events that are now unknown due to the effect of the classification, and we will know them with ICD-11, and without a doubt, that is what many need and want.
What tools do we have? We have all this implementation package knowing the classification as I showed, but I just want to refer to the maps which are already available, and they will be there in the USB, and just by doing the exercise of analyzing the map, very simple, you already understand. This is so friendly actually that you can see how. We have this matching between chapters that Robert is also talking about, and you can select by code, and there are 3 maps, so they are really useful, and you can use these elements to foresee some changes or effects. What else should we be considering concerning the analysis? Well, of course, it has to be under an implementation and transition plan. That's the proposal we are considering in our unit, and with our colleagues from the WHO, which is the most suitable and relevant, not only technically, but also politically. And the analysis has to be done in an integrated, joint manner, and we recommend that it takes place with other areas, for example, those who are in charge of control programs, diseases, because they have knowledge of the event. That's why this has to be a joint effort, and at the same time we raise awareness, we warn, we don't alarm, we inform, which is really different, and we identify sensitive topics. That's why the analysis has to take place, and this has to begin in a scheduled manner, because of course it's not so simple depending on how this is going to be addressed. In the case of our regional office and with support from our WHO colleagues, we already consider this important component. We ratified our collaboration, and of course, the most important thing for us is to people to join us, and because we already are working on this. So, which opportunities does the ICD-11 bring? It gives us momentum to improve quality and credibility of information for all the indicators we know. Have there been changes or not in our region, especially in the priority countries? We should be taking this as a way to have more energy. Multiple cause analysis. No more than 6 countries in our region are capturing multiple causes. No more than 6. And the majority mentions that the reason is because they lack resources. And it's an improved classification, and the most important part, it's constantly enriched. It may bring some stress, yeah, because we prefer that everything remains static, but this is an advantage really because it becomes better over time. And that's the best possibility for updating. And of course, being able to know and understand mortality patterns in a better way. Finally, this is a photo I like using a lot, that I started using when I started working with the CIF a long time ago. And why am I including this? Because faced with a new classification, we always have a series of even stigmas depending on where it takes place. And I believe in ICD-11's case, due to all the history it has, the different groups and the strengths we have in our region, we are in this process, and rather than just being afraid and looking at the other person, what's happening to him or her, whether this person dies or not, but rather this is a challenge, and an interesting challenge at that, and in terms of analysis, it's a really interesting challenge. Thank you so much. Okay, for next point. Okay, in the next part, we are going to be sharing some experiences. We have some points for you to know about the experience concerning the implementation of our family 4 classifications, and we will be talking about the 2 main ones we have, which we commonly use, ICD-10 and CAP. And there are many matching issues. For example, the need for this to be updated to be at the forefront concerning the generation of information in health, specifically ICD. And this implies training and in a specific term in each of our countries. For example, in the case of Mexico, if their knowledge is separated, for example, or divided on different health instances, the National Mexican Institute of Social Security, state workers, among others. So it's important, and even INEGI, who is in charge of generating and publishing official information for vital statistics. So this is also a challenge, the fact that we can homologate all these criteria between institutions, and also officially publishing these statistics in the country. This is a challenge because it's important to have all these updates everywhere in our country, and resources. The fact that we need to train all coders, even at the jurisdictional or the hospital unit level, it also implies a challenge. With the experience we use is the cascade effect. Once we already have the updates in place, we train the instructors, and we have the advantage that we have at least one in each entity, and they in turn also train the other coders, the technicians. For now, we are in this situation of measuring impact. It's important to mention and also highlight right now that when this was already said throughout the day, and there aren't going to be changes in mortality for the transition of ICD-11, no changes from the 2016 version, and it will be interesting to see how many of us are already working on this, because if we are not working with the 2018 version right now, which is the one that's officially published by the PAHO, people are going to have to undergo this transition first from ICD 2015, and in some cases I dare say people are using ICD 2008. So it is going to be a significant impact for their mortality component, because undertaking this is important to move from Rule 2 to SP1, SP2. And with the impact it may have, we have identified at least two, and especially in the accepted and rejected sequences. And in the morning we were talking about this official implementation in Mexico that started in 2018, both for ICD and the automated coding system IRIS. And there was a sequence that wasn't allowed, which was HIV due to transfusion requiring infections. And it was even an external cause, well, because we already had a specific example. I don't know, for a fist fight, this person had to be administered a transfusion, and then this person got HIV and also epilepsy, that no external cause was involved in any other afflictions, save epilepsy. There was a sequence allowed in that regard. Now, it's allowed even for epilepsy. So we detected some cases, and those are the most in Mexico, and in this first year-end closing we are measuring the impact. What's the impact this situation may have? So this is something that we have to be very present in this entire situation. For the example of applicability, talking about the CID, we think the most important examples we have in the region come from Argentina and our Chilean colleagues who have already implemented this use for an official document even, such as a disability certificate. So the challenge we have in Mexico at least is about this concrete applicability of CIF, which is what we have to do one way or the other, because due to an official disposition this has to be out there in the first half of this year. And then it also goes to a conglomerate, which is about using at least these two main classifications. I mean, the health area already coded, and also its impact on functioning versus the disability in the population or people. Well, to summarize, from our point of view, we believe we are doing great. These meetings and activities and revisions that we are mentioning here are good for this transition, and there will be a point in time where most, if not all, countries should already have the latest available version of ICD, so they can support this transition towards ICD-11, and that's what I have for now. Okay, so together with what Manuel commented on, and this is an important moment. We talked about training, we talked about the fact that, well, Manuel already commented on this, we have been using these updates as of 2018, I mean the ICD-10 2018 edition. Chile already attended the course, Ecuador already went through the coding course, and well, now I think we are also going to be talking about these codes that have been required in the classifications. And also considering this, there is something important we wanted to comment, and in these courses, in this new redesign of these courses, that already included updates as of 2018, and first, we have already given the basic one, but it's been updated minimally. There have been some impact on some codes like dengue and so on, but the application of rules as they were known before, now there are steps, will be addressed in the intermediate courses. And for morbidity, for example, but there wasn't such a big impact, but in the mortality one there was. What's important, not only the fact that we had a change from rule to step, also how we apply that, and that as Dr. Patricia Soliz was commenting, makes it so we reach a different underlying cause from compared to what we had in the 2015 edition, measuring impact, as Manuel was commenting on. For example, in Mexico, we are going to find the HIV/AIDS. It appears among the main causes of death. What are we waiting or expecting for with the 2018 information, and we are just wrapping the year up and analyzing this? That most likely there will be a fall or a decrease in this rate trend. But there's been an impact, of course, because now we have this whole list of causes that are accepted to lead to AIDS. So, of course, in the natural history of this disease, it may be caused by transfusions and so on, but it wasn't accepted, or rather included in the accepted and rejected sequences until now. We do accept that any disease requiring a transfusion, whether hemophilia, anemia, even trauma, needs informed as leading to HIV/AIDS. This pathology or trauma can be accepted as the underlying cause. So AIDS will not be among the main causes, but rather the trauma, anemia, hemophilia. But that's why it's important for us to be prepared, and even more so now that we move on to ICD-11, so we can understand the epidemiological behavior, so we can also provide answers to all authorities when they tell us that some pathology trends have changed, for example, cerebrovascular diseases, and also this association to this original cause, and now we have a direct cause of death. It also changes the underlying resulting cause. So that's where we are, and our colleagues that attend these courses, this is really important, something that was commented on the webinars. It's necessary that when they begin the implementation, because they may pick a course, and we were commenting on this at lunch, and there will be a course in Mexico as well for instructors. And well, it's going to be with updates, of course, and people who attend this course and then they go back to their countries, everyone will then have to join these updates at the same time. It's not just about, for example, having one institution or a hospital going first and using these updates. The entire country has to do the same, and that is really important. Now, Adriana is going to be talking about some needs we have had about creating or using some codes for ICD to assign or allocate some interesting or necessary pathologies.
Gracias, Amanda. Compartimos.
Thank you. We'll share this. Well, one of the topics presented a lot long ago, and we faced a training course to end up in training on this topic, which is chronic kidney disease due to non-conventional reasons. So we went to Nicaragua. There was a training course because there's actually a problem, and this is an old publication which we already presented, but this is the basis of the problem. This chronic kidney disease was observed especially in the Central American area, where there was a disease that popped up, and it's not due or caused to common pathologies such as diabetes and hypertension. And it happened in age groups for young people between 20 years and more, but with very, very specific conditions, which means, as you may see here, these are people working on the fields, collecting sugarcane, that type of work in terrible conditions, really, where they don't have necessary rest, where they are not properly fed, but specifically in those works where there were some preconditions, for instance, environmental toxic fumes, agrochemical, the inappropriate hygiene in the labor place, and high temperatures, insufficient amount of water ingested also. So all of those conditions, they began to observe that these people would acquire this disease of a different cause to what is normal and in different age groups to what usually happens, and due to that, they prepare a training course to provide necessary explanation and the need to use a different code that is not the typical one for chronic kidney disease. That's why Amanda was speaking about the use of specific codes where we can't use the normal ones from the urinary disease chapter. In that training course, they did some medical terminology, also morbidity and mortality, and was integrated by some Central American countries that moved to Nicaragua. And there we begin to see, could you move it so they can see? So look at the conclusions, because the training course was uncommon. No, here, the third column. So we begin to see that to determine this, certificate of death had few data regarding this, and so we began to see the need there was a need of more data in the death certificate guiding the coder to reach and prove that there you go, that truly it wasn't chronic kidney disease, a common thing. To make a study, there were some variables missing. According to ANS, and specifically it was missing how to register those external factors which would induce the fact that this is not a common cause. So we didn't have, because you code the basic cause directly. So not all causes were being codified, so the death certificate was not multiple causes. So try to obtain all the other pathologies or all the other factors that makes us think that this chronic kidney insufficiency would belong to different causes. I'm going to bother you again. On the third column, up. And here we see that from there, they participated from my Congress due to kidney diseases, where there was some opposition regarding the different factors and the conditions where people were, the people suffering this disease. So, as a recommendation, as one of the recommendations was using a certificate, a unique death certificate according to the OPS guidelines, including variables to rescue the information which allows to analyze death in all contexts, as we said, coding by multiple causes, and to truly be able to see that these deaths were related with high temperatures, with the lack of drinking water, and especially fertilizers. Also, it was necessary to complete the second part of the certificate to truly see what are the other causes of predisposed cancer. So for that, we could see the problem on how to identify that pathology with those specific features. And so Amanda, with an OPS, we tried to find and locate from ICD-10 a code in the chapter of you. So I don't know if that was communicated, if you knew about it. So it was U50. Oh, I can't show you this. Oh, there it goes. As you can see in the last point, it was specified that within the chapter of use, they were locating in U50 when, in the case of having a chronic kidney disease, due to reasons that are not traditional. That was the name. That is a code which is obviously temporary. However, to provide some solution to the cases, where there are cases that have a lack of this function in those scenarios. This is one of the codes of U on the U chapter, which we used to use. Amanda, would you like to speak about the others? Yes, as Adriana said, in this topic, the fact that a death certificate, this is basic cause for kidney chronic disease, well, it's not really an uncommon code, or is it? It is on the non-useful codes, yes? It's included? Well, because many of the certificates are certainly not enough. They are as the basic cause, kidney disease in terminal stage, right? At least in our country. Many are just left there. So what's happened? What's missing in the doctor to indicate the cause that makes the kidney fail? Most cases with clinical kidney disease are linked to diabetes and hypertension. And in those cases, with this topic, we've seen with young people, as Adriana said, working outside, and in terrible conditions with excessive heat, without drinking water, with fertilizers, also using highness, this would kill these people. So the situation was to identify, because the basic cause won't be that outside, to do research on which one lives in the chronic kidney disease if there's hypertension or some tumor. So what was done was looking for a code on chapter 22, as Adriana said, to make an intentionated search on all of those certificates where the basic cause is kidney chronic disease, when nothing is shown that damages the kidney. And so there's an intentional search. It is a temporary code. And once you analyze and do research that the person has passed away because it was under the sun, because they didn't drink water, because they were in contact with fertilizers, because have ingested highness, that is the basic cause. that external pattern that makes to see that the kidney has failed. So U50 is a temporary code when researching these pathologies, which we don't know why they've happened. That is the use of the 50. We don't want to alter the classification ever. We want to know what's happening. There was also one question done at the forum regarding how to codify euthanasia. And the truth is that it was a bit complicated. Casey and SMS worked in this. And they even sent the mortality reference group. And I think that there hasn't been an answer, but we've also done an analysis each 11 months, and what we mentioned as a provisional answer as the answer from OMS, WHO is 52. But that's a basic cause, but direct cause, because the person deciding that they want for euthanasia to be their solution, they have a problem. And so they decide that this is what they want to get, some disability, some disease. So the basic cause, to the 52. So we need to explain to the doctor that please, those doctors for euthanasia in the countries where they have been accepted as a direct cause for death are euthanasia that are codified as 252, as we obtained a response from WHO, and that was due to the problem that makes the person wants their lives to end. So we do have those two codes plus other of echinococcosis, tropical echinococcosis that Argentina sent. They sent that question to echinococcosis, and that was 51. So we have three codes. Well, OPS is from knowledge from OPS to use it regionally. 50, 51, and 52. Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate our two colleagues, Amanda and Adriana, because, well, in the forum, Roberto Beckham, it's been something that it's becoming extremely key for the region. And I'd like to make a clarification related to something that I don't know if I understood correctly what you said, because it is important for countries, well, training with the last update, but this is not a requirement for the adoption of ICD-11. We shouldn't, well, we need to congratulate Mesa. Congratulations to you, to Danny. It was very productive. I think that I'm going to add to what Dr. Vilma said. These have been three very important presentations because it allows us to be aware about some steps that countries are taking for the implementation of ICD-11 and some provisions that we should be doing to our own countries related to implementation on one side. And on the other side, it is key what Dr. Soliz talked about regarding begin to see what is the impact that ICD-11 will have on the mortality structure of our country. Because that mortality rate is not just due to epidemiological factors, but the allocation of resources in order to specify and to prevent death causes. So we're speaking about pesos and cents that right now in the world are extremely important to use it in an efficient way. So I would open up the microphone to make some comments, some observations, right? The issue of chronic kidney disease in non-traditional observations. It is something that hits us. It's not that the deaths are something different. The way that these young people are dying because they continue to die is a problem that has been detected for 30 years and begins to be introduced in Central America, in the Chiapa region, in some South American countries, where you begin to detect. Why do I want to say this, and why I want to invite you to check this topic? Because death, when it comes, hits us very strongly. And when we speak about data, with ICD-10 and 11, and in the case of mortality, in case of morbidity, it is associated to beings, human beings. So it's not the amount as such. The amount is something that interests us because we want to avoid. But that commitment, and I am certain that everybody here and those in the country working in this field, they have this commitment of trying to do their best to detect in the best way, as Luis said, by using the few resources that our country has, and especially in the information centers that are quite orphans, but that we have that commitment to work in the most jointly way among all of the countries that have this very same problem. Costa Rica in the Digoya area, we have that same problem, but how can we continue to work? And I'd like to recognize the work that these collaborating centers have been doing. SMS and SCADESE have been doing specifically an amazing work. And just to finish, I would like a big round of applause because I think they deserve it. Thank you. Anybody else have a comment? It's interesting, the observation from Mexico related to the fact that updating with 2018, well, the transition to ICD-11 is going to be less traumatic. I'm worried because we are well, basically we copy. Our databases in mortality uses the ICD-10 catalog that Mexico hasn't facilitated, and this is a catalog we make appropriate for the country because there are some diseases which are not object of notification as it happens in Mexico. Alacran spike, this is added in the surveillance notification type, and with the technology department, they take over for the basis we have in line on the death certificate. So what happens?
So far, we have been working on the 2016 one, which was the last one we were able to acquire, and we Dominicanized it, as we say. Since we are interested in updating this to 2018, and actually we have started training, how can we access this catalog so we can work at least on mortality? In my country, about morbidity, since we don't have a morbidity system, every hospital registers based on what each of them is developing, and now the government is considering what's called the digital integrated file. Now, I think it may be really interesting because this is just getting started. The goal is 65 hospitals. So far, we are working in 5, and we may see if we can adapt the ICD-11 for this process, because as it's something new, we could see, I mean, it may not be so traumatic in terms of the transition, which is different from mortality, and which is another component. I wonder how could we access and make it so our technology department could work and get started and gradually to train doctors, as I said, it must not be necessarily at the national level, but we could start testing how, and especially on this reluctance doctors sometimes have And we also have some serious inconveniences because doctors don't know, and they must not just code and their ICD-10. And I think this may be easier with ICD-11 first. It's in the interest of the country to access this catalog for the 2018 edition update for mortality, and also how can we relate this integrated health expedient or file which is digital, so we can include or incorporate ICD-11 and start testing, training to to gain experience, so we can then replicate this at least on the public level, so we can have all our hospitals using this file. And if you'll allow me to comment, just to add to the comment made by Vilma a while ago, it's not a requirement definitely for people to go through the 2018 version to reach to get to the ICD-11. It's not a requirement, but it would make this transition easier in terms of mortality and also all the fields we have seen so far, the length of the code, the extension codes, and so on. And it will be up to each country to decide whether they use the 2008 and 2015, and then they take the leap to this new revision of the classification on one hand, and on the other, concerning these catalogs, well, it will be enough for them to send us an email. Usually when this happens, I ask people to send us an email, including also our representative from PAHO and our focal point in PAHO, Mexico, just so we can confirm that we are collaborating with the different countries. It will be enough for them to send us an email, but also including my bosses or representatives from PAHO, so they can be aware of this. Okay, I just want to make a comment, and that's why we're talking about the courses. I believe we need to have everything properly controlled when, yes, working with 2 revisions of ICD-10 and 11, because at least the experience we can give you from the CMS and CASI point of view is that the entire country has to use one classification for generating statistics, because there have been some cases we have had some face-to-face courses that in some countries people actually download these updates and they use them for their own hospital units, but then there is no homogeneity in information, and then we end up like the Babel's Tower. So I think if this is going to be used for mobility, it should be really controlled in terms that of coders, because right now ICD-11 is the hottest new thing, everybody wants it, and I think it's something that we have to control as a country so we don't have any issues concerning their use or people being confused a little bit. So that's something I can tell you. Manuel is in charge of CMS, and it's what we are working on. That's why we're saying the courses that we are giving in Mexico, so we could get started with the 2018 edition. Well, first we started working on that 1.5 years before. We needed to have these updates in Spanish. We did have them. We prepared the systems because we must also change these systems if it's a part of the implementation on the change of an edition or revision, to also make changes in formats if necessary to train everybody. But I think everyone must be at the same level as a country. That I think is a comment or recommendation. Any additional comments? Okay, I think this is a very important discussion, and I think that tomorrow we are going to be talking about the preparations for the implementation and also to elaborate more on that sense. But concerning the discussion we have had, I believe it's important to truly reflect what the starting point is. And we were talking about mortality, morbidity, which is the main purpose, so I don't see. I mean that for countries and institutions where there was no coding tradition, as it's been said before, I think it's worth it to think about whether we can take this job or not, and to really get started and working with ICD-11. And that's why, if we have these conditions where people have this practice, there are other aspects to be taken into account that we have seen throughout Patricia's presentation in terms of the statistical impact. Well, there are many things that we can manage that can be adjusted, and so any adjustments can be made in the presentation of data for ICD-10 and 11, so I don't see that much of a problem. And I think we should be thinking about a category engagement, or rather, I think there is a flexibility, and as it's been said before, in situations where we can take the jump or we can have this leap and start implementing ICD-11. And also Patricia showed us that for statistics and also these codes, whether on 10 or 11, it doesn't change so much. In this manner, it will be better to use the easier system to use than just getting started with ICD-10. And so many people will be attending these code courses, and it will be way easier to have these instruments, because really the problem is not on coding, but rather good quality documentation. And just to wrap up, because I believe we have a good example, which is the US, one of the countries that has most information, produces information, and they use this information for their policies. For a long time, they used number 9 for mobility and also ICD-10 for this reason. One of the things that we are proposing is to see, for example, I don't know, if a country cannot start with everything, they can start with a single hospital and implement this, for example, in morbidity, mortality, and I think mortality may be easier for the US. For Dominican Republic, it may be easier to start with morbidity, but we don't have this is such a categorical thing, so thank you so much. And the last comment? Thank you. Well, I also want to congratulate Amanda, Adriana, and Manuel, not only for the work they do, but also for all the collaboration they give all of us. Concerning trainings, I wanted to mention the fact that early on, when we were talking about possible courses that the INE showed us, maybe one of the necessities is precisely about awareness that has to be raised concerning the importance of this analysis, and also the time technicians must have in the respective countries to be able to do this. Many times, for people to be able to come to a meeting like this, we have to continue working overnight so we can be able to come, or we run into many obstacles. So I think a course not only for doctors to understand the importance of a correct feeling, but rather the importance of specialization and professionalization that all the technicians that participate in this must have. Concerning all these changes in ICD-10 and 11, Amanda has been really clear in the fact that countries have to be as uniform as possible. And I ask you, Amanda, is uniformity within mobility, or is this about a morbid mortality, if you will? Because we know that maybe for morbidity, because of all the information systems that all healthcare centers, hospitals have, and so on, it may be more complicated for some countries when compared to others than when we have a totally centralized mortality. Thank you, Olga. Well, I was saying this because the questions we get in the Becker forum, the webinar, and also Patricia was also there, and there's been a lot of confusion these days. And it's important to clarify to our colleagues when are we going to start, or if we have ICD-11, because even the authorities are wondering, and many times the coder doesn't know what to say when asked this question. And the idea, well, and Emiliana was saying, okay, if they have this already controlled in the sense that mortality coders, if they are not going to be using ICD-11, they should be just working on mortality ICD-10 and morbidity using ICD-11 later on. I'm saying controlled because there have been a lot of expectations concerning ICD-11, so they communicate, and they are students actually from our courses, and as soon as they have anything new, they apply it. Now, to implement a change, a new classification, of course, we have to prepare capture systems and so on. Formats, well, it's not going to be done manually, but at least to train people. So that's what I was commenting on based on that. But Jacob and Nenad made some really valid comments that if they are going to be working on mobility, go on. Don't get confused though, because as soon as you get something new, people are like, okay, why are you still on ICD-10 and I'm working on ICD-11? So people are wondering, how can we make it so we have ICD-11 now? That's what they are asking for. Thank you, and sorry. I also wanted to suggest, then I also want to insist for all this preparation that is about this component of capturing information and so on, is about the preparing for the decision-making level, because I believe that even our language has to change. If one, which is a case, makes or works in the generation of information area, and they are going to be presenting and talking about a new classification, and as soon as they say, okay, we are going to have an impact, it's traumatizing. So I wouldn't buy into his or her idea. I wouldn't change the system. I wouldn't move a thing. So a concrete point is also about considering that there is a level, and also the country level, and of course regional and global. It has to be done for one group which is in charge of deciding, because the coder is not going to decide that ICD-11 will be implemented at the national level. The coder has an important, really important role, but they don't decide what happens in terms of systems and health policies, and that's a concrete event. And then we have some actors or who answer too, because they have the money, and I have to present something real. I'm not going to lie. I also have to present the opportunity and the advantages, but also the evidence of what may happen and what is in it for me. And that's something that I insist has to be worked on now. And many people here already have this. When CIDE came up in 2001, people thought that CIF was going to replace ICD, and they were saying, hey, when is this going to replace ICD? Never. But that remained for a long time, and most likely some people still think about ICD, so we get a new classification. But once again, that's the decision-making maker that we want to attract for an implementation at the national scale with a sustained plan or support. Because if it's just about doing some testing and that's it, the plan is not going to progress. And we must consider, even in our strategy of how to communicate and present, the advantages and the actual disadvantages of a new classification.
Just one last thing from the OPE point of view. What are we doing? Because we were communicated with a private hospital, even from Chile. We will respect the decision making on the member states. So if the country wishes to adopt a strategy, this is the strategy with which we will support the country. Any private hospital, and private hospitals do want it a lot, we won't continue. We will reissue to the government, right? Just a short intervention. I think that our role at this level is to learn ICD-11, to learn it, to know it, know the advantages, the disadvantages, the way of codifying the changes, the possible impacts, in order to tell those deciding, the authorities, if is the appropriate moment or not, and how changes would work in the system, what they would be, what would it imply, the costs, which we might not know. But we need to be prepared technically to advise those making the decisions, because maybe a board will say, let's go and implement the 11 one, and we do it, and I have $200 million. And yes, that's it, and they spent $200 million, and the statistics are bad. So I think that that's why they brought us here, because we need to understand, we need to codify, so if there's any doubt, we will know how to solve it. And we can tell them, okay, yes, but we need to train ourselves, but we need to do this. The roadmap, that is what we need to focus on. So if they ask, we will say, no, we can actually do it. We can actually do it. We know we could do ICD-11. That's ready. Right now, we could say we're going to use it because everything is basically done. We need to perfect it as ICD-10. But to modify the system, it's another thing. We need to imagine two strategies. One is to train people, and the other one, marketing on the OPS, WHO area to make the authorities to be interested. So if both currents are linked, we will have a critical mass of people with the proper capabilities so the implementation can be easy. I just wanted to highlight something from what you were mentioning. There are countries where the opposite happens. We don't have to convince, but the authorities think it's very nice to use the last version. I think that the key thing is to make our authorities aware, and we need a roadmap, because it's not just modifying systems. We need to train the people. We need to make all of those studies to know about the impact on the classification and to be able to analyze it, because it is a structured change in order to analyze information. And I think this is key. More than advocating what's important or not, it is what it implies and why is it important to respect that. And it's just not just modifying the system. And as the doctor said, maybe tomorrow, because we can do it, but the results might be a disaster. So speaking about the comments from Patricia Soliz, I met her when she was presented ICD. I looked at, I'm sorry, I didn't know about FIC, and when she finished, I approached her and I told her, when are we going to begin with this in my institution? And so far I can tell you, she said, it's not that easy, and I can tell you, you need to prepare the team, and that's the topic. You need to know well to inform the authorities and to manage to obtain the objective. So, summarizing to what everyone said. First of all, this is a high specialization topic. It's not something we need to deal with all countries, because not all countries have the same conditions. Half were out and the other one was in. So I think that there's a select group in the region, which is the one that needs to lead and to prepare the tools to later on convey them in an operational way to the people that don't know English and to those that don't understand what ICD is, because many don't understand what this is. Authorities in general, those who become authorities, are the most ignorant people on the statistics field, or you can deny it. We have been in meetings with boards that have been committed that students will participate in the training course, and they will give them room to train in the level place, and two things happened. When doing the training course, the same person that raised their hands denies for others to do the training course. And when they ask to do it in the labor place, they say no. And people that have a vacation works on the weekends. Now, that is not that. I think that we need to make a work, first of all, to recognize his history. There's a chart that Patricia Soliz did, and if I'm not mistaken, it's you, that shows the evolution of access to each ICD. And you can see how countries enter, little by little. So you shouldn't go and dive on the pool, because the ones that will be guilty are the statistical directors. When the statistics director sees that a code doesn't match with what they have and they need to reformulate the value because they're linking 4 codes into one, I want to see you trying to explain why the trends for one disease have changed so abruptly, because people don't know about statistics. So you're going to go mad trying to explain why before something that was 50 AB now is 55B XJZ at that has to be explained. So I'm not speaking in funny terms, but seriously, we need to be aware there's a specialized group. That's why WHO specializes on collaborative centers. Why don't they have collaborating centers? Yes, reformulated and Costa Rica needs to have a reference one. Yes, because some people working break their backs. So specify that group and working with that group in a roadmap. If not, the countries will raise their hand and say, yes, they're following that roadmap, and when they go to the country, they will find someone that knows more or less, and they want to obstaculize and won't be able to do so. This is the last one. It is key to plan the introduction of a new classification. As Nenad said, it is different. If you don't have a lot, you can begin easily, and if you have an integrated system. But you can also plan as by death, and you planning with different plans. And if it's very complicated, that is how you make coordination among many countries for planning, coordinated planning, and at the end you do planning for 8 years to go to the new classification. This is not a good idea. For mortality information, yes, we do have standardized tools, and we have to do it in a coordinated way. For morbidity data, there's no way of doing a comparison between countries, because morbidity, what is the definition of a hospital? What is the definition of what is entering? Do you know 5 cases of diabetes? Is that the same person coming 5 times or 5 people they don't know? You know at a national level. So international coordination in this is not that important. It's more important to facilitate all code systems so you can concentrate on the quality of medical documentations on the medical files. That is important. And it's important to plan, yes, but not planning just to plan, to get lost on a planning network. Thank you. Just one last thing. Actually, we work with the collaborative centers from the beginning of the process. We work together, and at some point, we've magnified so countries can also participate. So the group, the select group, that will define the roadmap, it's actually a guideline. So countries can, according to their resources, adopt or not. The select group is you. It was a memorandum for the countries asking for someone that comes here and participates, someone representing this, and it's us. Tomorrow we'll move forward in this roadmap, and countries will adopt and adjust with certainty But the select group is you, the ones here, together with our collaborative centers. Thank you, Doctor. Well, it's been a long day, filled with information, but very richful. It has allowed us to reflect a lot, especially in this last stage. We appreciate everyone who have done presentations today, and see you tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. We also ask an applause to the facilitators. Something very important. Tomorrow we will give you an OCB with all the presentations, the material. So please, the speakers for tomorrow, be kind enough to send your presentations or find me, but before 10 a.m. because we will record OCBs. So several of you must know according to the agenda, depending if it's a session from the information unit or analysis unit, who is presenting, to be much more efficient than today. So please, and USB must have all the material, also all the presentations from WHO, and this is going to be sent. They are on the translation process, so you can use that material. Actually, we're developing much more in those diffusion tasks. In a short, medium term, you will have that material in Spanish. Once again, thank you for your patience, for your time. And I think that you have a pending task. Yes, you do.